Hello everybody, it's Wojo. Welcome to another quick algebra video. Today we're going to be looking at the topic of how to factor trinomials. Just to give a quick background, factoring is important to help us solve and graph quadratics. It can help in solving some tougher physics problems. It's good in using manufacturing, design, optimization. It's an all-around good skill to have, one that we're going to be using quite a bit going forward in our algebra work and algebra 2 work. What we're going to look at today is how to factor a trinomial like this, x squared plus 7x plus 12. Just so you guys remember, the word factor you've heard before. If I, for example, ask for the factors of 24, you might give me numbers like 2 and 12, or 3 and 8, 4 and 6. These are all numbers that 1 and 24, numbers that multiply to 24. Factoring just means find numbers that multiply to give us this. So today we're going to be looking at finding something that multiplies together to give me x squared plus 7x plus 12. It's important to know that not every polynomial is factorable, just like regular numbers, like the number 7. It's prime. The only thing that multiplies to 7 is 1 in itself. It's possible to have prime polynomials as well. But today in our work, we're going to give you all polynomials that can be factored. Now, for us to do our work today on factoring, the one thing that we really have to be able to kind of understand is how the multiplication process with polynomials works. And so I just kind of want to go back and just review really quick, which will get us to how to do this problem, how we multiply polynomials to begin with. So if I gave you a problem like x plus 3 times x plus 4, and I asked you to multiply those together, we kind of talked about this idea that to multiply, everything in this set of parentheses has to be distributed or multiplied to everything in this set. So this x is going to get multiplied by the x over here. X times x is x squared. This x is also going to get multiplied by the positive 4. X times positive 4 is positive 4x. Now that we've distributed everything in that parenthesis, or sorry, this x to everything in this parenthesis, now we're going to distribute or multiply the 3 by everything over here. 3 times x is a positive 3x, so we put plus 3x. Positive 3 times positive 4 is plus 12. And then we talked about this idea that we can simplify this because 4x and 3x are like terms. So we can have x squared, the 4x and the 3x gives me 7x, and then the plus 12 at the end. So we can kind of combine these to give us our final answer. And so one of the things that we want you to kind of notice is if we look at it, when we multiply two binomials together. Now remember, binomial just means there's two terms in there. X and the 3 are the two terms, and this one is an x and a 4, so it's also two terms. That when I multiply two binomials, it results, because we can combine like terms, into a trinomial. Now this is going to be important because we're going to have to work backwards today. They're going to give us the x squared plus 7x plus 12, and our answer is going to be the x plus 3 times x plus 4. So if we kind of go back to our original problem, which I haven't really solved yet or talked about how to solve it, if they ask me to factor x squared plus 7x plus 12, my job is to think, well, what could have multiplied to give me this? And so I say, well, I notice that I have a trinomial here. Well, what kind of gives me a trinomial? Oh, well, I know through lots of practice of multiplying that I always have two binomials that turn into a trinomial. So I can kind of start to plot out what I think my answer would be, or in this case, the problem that would give me this answer. So when I say, oh, I notice there's a trinomial, I start to look and say, well, it's probably something plus something times something plus something, or something minus something times something plus something. There's lots of variations, but there's going to be two terms here and two terms here, and that's going to result in this trinomial. Once I kind of have the basics laid out, I can start plotting things in and putting things in that would give us these x squared, 7x, and 12 terms. So to get the x squared, I think, well, where did the x squared come from? It came from the x times the x. So I know that to get an x squared, I'm going to need an x here in this first spot, and it's going to get multiplied by an x over here in this spot. So x times x is going to give me the x squared. Now I have to come up with, where did the 7x and 12 come from? And this could be a little bit trickier spot. And so I'll do something, a lot of times people will see this, they call it factor x. You could use this if you like. I think it's helpful. I know there's two numbers to deal with here, the 12 and the 7. I'm going to put the last number 12 on top of my x. I'm going to put the 7 on the bottom. I have to think of numbers that I could put in here that are going to give me this 12 and 7 combination. And so to help me figure this out, I got to go back and think about, well, where did the 12 come from in the first place? Let's look back at our problem. Where did we get this 12? It came from the 3 multiplied by the 4. So I know this last number 12 is what I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me that number. Now, there's lots of numbers that multiply to 12. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. So how do I know which of those combinations of numbers I need? If I put 1 and 12, would that be the right answer? Well, if 12 was the only number I had to worry about, it might be. But remember, we also have this 7 to deal with. So let's look back at our problem and say, where did this 7 come from? It came from the 4 and the 3 getting added together. These two numbers are going to have to add or combine to give me 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and say, well, can I think of numbers that multiply to 12 that combine to 7? Oh yeah, 3 and 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. 3 plus 4, if I combine them, 7. So that's what helps me go in and fill in the rest of my problem. This is almost like a puzzle where I have to fill in the pieces. I kind of know the skeleton structure, but I'm not really sure the numbers. And so x plus 3 times x plus 4 does indeed multiply to that. So that would be my solution. That's kind of what we're asking you guys to do today, is come up with those combinations of numbers that if I multiply out are going to get me back to my original problem. Now we're going to look at a couple examples just to give you guys a good sense of kind of how to do this. We'll look at positives, negatives, and kind of everything in between. So let's look at one more quick example. If I asked you to factor, now we're not going to know the answer ahead of time like we did last time, so we can really think about it. If I asked you to factor x squared plus 8x plus 12, and you're just staring at this problem and it's blank, here's kind of all the thoughts that we'd want you to think about as you're doing this. You're going to think about the word factor. You know the word factor means make a multiplication problem. So you think, well, 3 times 4 isn't going to give me this. It's going to have to be something different than just normal numbers multiplied together, because our answer is this trinomial. And so in my head I'm thinking, oh, I have a trinomial. Well, do I know what a trinomial, what kind of multiplication leads me to a trinomial? Yeah, a binomial times a binomial. So x plus something, x plus something, x minus something, x minus something. But I know that format, and I know that because we've multiplied a lot of these together, and these binomials times binomials almost always leads to a trinomial. There are a couple of cases where they don't. We call them special cases. We'll talk about that later. So in my head I'm thinking, well, do I know how to get an x squared when I multiply out? Yeah, I have an x in the first spot and an x in the first spot, because x times x gives me x squared. It's important you have these x's in that first spot. Each one of these should have two terms in it. Our first term is going to be an x times an x. Now we got to figure out how to get that 12 and that 8. And again, I put the last number on top and I put the bottom number on the bottom. And so I have 12 and 8. And I'm thinking that numbers have to multiply to 12 and combine through adding or subtracting to 8. And so thinking of numbers that multiply to 12, 1 times 12 wouldn't add to 8. We've already tried 3 and 4, that adds to 7. So let's try the other numbers that multiply to 12, 2 and 6. 2 times 6 is 12, 2 plus 6 is 8. And so I know that the numbers that I'm going to need to put in here are going to have to be the numbers positive 2 and positive 6. So because it's a positive 2 and because it's a positive 6, I'm going to use the plus signs here. And then this is going to be my answer. Because remember, factor means make a multiplication problem. We know this is a multiplication problem because there's nothing in between, no plus sign or minus sign in between the parentheses. If I did multiply these out, an x times an x would give me an x squared. A 2 times 6 would give me a 12. If I multiply the x times 6, it only gives me 6x, and I need 8x, but I also have this 2x to combine with it. And so 6x and 2x is going to combine to my 8x, and that's when I know that I got it right. And so that's going to be kind of the work that we're going to be asking you guys to look at. There will be some practice. There's kind of two different versions of the practice you can look at. You can look at kind of a worksheet. The answers are at the bottom, so you can kind of look at that. And there's also a quizzes for you guys to try. If you feel like you already got the idea, you might be able to jump right into the quizzes and just kind of show off kind of what you've learned today. I did want to look at a couple examples that had some subtractions in them and ones that maybe the combinations of numbers aren't as easy to figure out. So all of our directions are going to be the same today. It's going to ask us to factor. This one's going to be x squared minus 6x minus 16. And so as you guys do your work today and you're looking at this and you're breaking it down, and again, this breaking down part is going to be super helpful when we solve, or maybe we need to manipulate these equations to graph them. So it's a good skill to have. And so the real big learning, though, the big idea is if I see a trinomial, remember a trinomial, like tricycle means 3, has 3 terms, x squared, the 6x, and the 16. I know now that trinomials came from a multiplication of a binomial times a binomial, more than likely. And so now I'm just going to start to build those pieces. How am I going to get this x squared? Where am I going to have to, what am I going to have to put in these spots? Remember, there's kind of like these blanks here. There's a blank here, a blank here, a blank here, and a blank here. What would I put in these blanks to get an x squared? I'm going to need an x here, and I'm going to take that x and I'm going to multiply it by an x here. I don't want to have the x in this one because they wouldn't get multiplied, they'd get added or subtracted. Parentheses in between these is going to make me multiply this x times this x, and that's going to give me the x squared. Now it's just a matter of how am I going to get the negative 6x and the negative 16. If you like to set up these factor x's over to the side, I find it helpful. You don't have to. But if I set them up, I put the last number on top because those are the numbers I need multiplied. And then the bottom number, negative 6, I need the 2 numbers that I'm going to put here to combine to negative 6. Now there is a resource we're going to put online for you guys to use. Maybe you don't know all the numbers that multiply. In this case to 16 you might know, but maybe you don't know all the numbers that multiply to, let's say, 72. We're going to give you access to something that looks like this, which looks kind of crazy at first, but if you kind of zoom in, it shows you all the different numbers that multiply to any given number. And so we're looking at finding numbers that multiply to negative 16. This won't show negatives on this sheet, but it will show all the positives. So I'm going to zoom into 16 on this so you can kind of see the 16. Now when you read these, you read them kind of like up and down. So 1 and 16 is a possible combination. A different combination is 2 and 8. Another combination is 4 and 4. And then they just reverse 8 and 2 and 16 and 1. So those are our possible answers, is 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. We can make them negatives if we need to. Now our goal is to get them to combine to be a negative 6. So we want them to combine to be a negative 6. So when I come back to this sheet and I look at them, I have a 1 and 16. Well, if I add 1 and 16, that gives me 17. If I subtract 1 minus 16, that's not going to give me the negative 6 I need. So I just kind of ignore that one and go to the next one. So next one I have 2 and 8. 2 plus 8 is 10, so that doesn't work. But 2 minus 8, 2 subtract 8 would give me negative 6. And so I know if I come back here now, if I put a 2 here and a negative 8, this would give me the combination that the numbers would multiply to this and combine to this. So 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. 2 minus 8 is negative 6. So now I know I got the right set of numbers. So I can just put in here, this must be an x plus 2 followed up by an x minus 8. By the way, you could have the x minus 8 here and the x plus 2 here, and it would work just the same. So that's kind of our idea, and that would be kind of all set. We'll look at one more just for good measure, just to see if it makes sense. Again, if you guys have questions, you can always email us. We'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Put out another video for you, meet up on Zoom or Google Meet, whatever works best for you guys. But last but not least, let's just factor x squared minus 9x plus 20. I want to show you that you could do these pretty quickly. I know now that it's binomial and binomial. X squared is x times x. Think about numbers that multiply to 20 that would combine to negative 9. Well, I know 4 times 5 is 20, but 4 plus 5 gives me a positive 9. So to fix that, I just make them both negative, and then I have my answer, x minus 4, x minus 5. So hopefully this makes sense. If you have questions, let us know. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. We'll see you soon.